The screams stopped first. That was the worst part. Not the blood, not the monsters, not even the darkness that seemed to swallow the dungeon whole. Just the silence. My name is Ethan Ward, C-rank hunter, 27 years old, and as far as I know, the last surviving member of the Iron Wolves raid party. 3 hours ago, there were 8 of us. Now there was only me. I pressed my back against the cold stone wall, struggling to keep my breathing quiet. Every breath burned. Blood soaked through the torn sleeve of my armor, dripping onto the floor in slow, steady drops. Somewhere beyond the tunnel, something moved. A scrape, a wet dragging sound, then silence again. The gate hanging above Perth was supposed to be routine. A low-risk C-rank dungeon. Easy money. The kind of raid hunters accepted without a second thought. But the moment we crossed the threshold, we knew something was wrong. The map crystals failed, the exit marker vanished, and the creatures waiting inside weren't supposed to exist. A distant howl echoed through the darkness, closer than before. My grip tightened around my spear. The party was dead. The exit was gone. And whatever had hunted us through this dungeon for the last 3 hours had finally found my trail. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, 2 pale eyes opened, and they were staring directly at me. The eyes didn't blink. They hung in the darkness like 2 pale moons, motionless and watching. Ethan froze. Every instinct screamed at him to run. Hunters learned early that fear could keep you alive. Pride killed more people than monsters ever did. The arrogant rushed forward. The frightened survived. So Ethan did what every surviving C-rank learned to do. He backed away slowly. The creature followed. Not charging, not attacking, just following. A scraping sound echoed through the tunnel as something heavy dragged itself across stone. Ethan turned and ran, his boots hammered against the dungeon floor. The beam from his enchanted flashlight bounced wildly across jagged walls. Behind him came the scraping sound. Slow, steady, patient, as if the thing already knew he couldn't escape. The tunnel suddenly widened into a massive cavern. Ethan skidded to a stop. Hundreds of stone pillars stretched upward into darkness. Strange blue crystals illuminated the chamber with a ghostly glow, and scattered across the floor were bodies. Hunter bodies, dozens of them. Some wore armor styles decades old. Others looked recent. All of them dead. A cold knot formed in Ethan's stomach. This wasn't a normal gate. This wasn't even a new gate. Hunters had been dying here for years, maybe decades, yet nobody had ever reported it. The sound grew louder. Ethan ducked behind a pillar and held his breath. The creature emerged. At first it looked human. Then it stepped into the crystal light. Every story Ethan had ever heard around hunter campfires suddenly came rushing back. The Pale Stalker, a dungeon legend. The monster nobody believed existed, an impossibly tall creature with bone-white skin stretched tightly over a skeletal frame. Its arms dragged along the ground. Its face possessed no mouth, no nose, only 2 glowing eyes buried inside a smooth, skull-like head. Veteran hunters told stories about it after raids. A creature that appeared in broken gates. A monster that hunted survivors. A thing that learned. Most dismissed the tales as hunter folklore. The kind of stories old hunters told rookies to scare them. But standing in that cavern, Ethan realized the stories hadn't been exaggerated. They had been warnings. The Pale Stalker paused. Its head slowly rotated, searching, listening. Ethan pressed himself tighter against the pillar. The creature tilted its head. Then it moved away. Not because it had lost him, because it knew exactly where he was. It simply wasn't in a hurry. A fresh wave of terror swept through Ethan. He understood then. The stalker wasn't hunting him. It was playing with him, the same way a cat played with a trapped mouse. Hours passed, maybe longer. Time felt strange inside the gate. Ethan moved carefully through the ruins beyond the cavern. The deeper sections of the dungeon revealed impossible things. Broken camps, ancient weapons, skeletons wearing hunter licenses from guilds that no longer existed, evidence of countless raids that had vanished without explanation. Then he found the journal. It lay beside a rusted breastplate near a collapsed tunnel. The leather cover nearly crumbled in his hands. Most of the pages were unreadable, but the final entries remained. Ethan's heart pounded as he read. The creature cannot leave. The gate is its prison. It hunts because it is starving. The core beneath the dungeon sustains the seal. If the core breaks, the prison breaks. If the prison breaks. The final sentence ended abruptly in a streak of dried blood. Ethan looked up. The entire dungeon suddenly made sense. This wasn't a gate. It was a cage. A massive magical prison hidden beneath reality. And hunters had been accidentally entering it for years. A distant scrape echoed behind him. Closer, the stalker had returned. Ethan shoved the journal into his pouch and ran. The tunnels twisted endlessly. Several times he caught glimpses of the creature, always watching, always following, never rushing, until he reached the heart of the dungeon, the core chamber. The room dwarfed everything he had seen so far. A gigantic crystal floated above a black abyss. Golden chains of mana stretched from the crystal into the darkness below. The air hummed with ancient power, and beneath the crystal, something moved, something enormous, something chained. The Pale Stalker stepped into the chamber. For the first time, it wasn't hiding. For the first time, it stood directly before him, and Ethan finally understood the truth. The creature wasn't the prisoner. It was the jailer. The glowing eyes fixed on him. Then the creature pointed toward the crystal. A warning, not a threat. A warning. The ground trembled violently. Cracks raced across the chamber floor. The crystal flickered. One of the golden chains snapped. The sound echoed like thunder. Far below, a roar shook the dungeon. A roar so deep and ancient that Ethan felt it in his bones. The real prisoner was waking up. The stalker turned toward the abyss. For the first time, Ethan saw fear in those glowing eyes. Another chain shattered, then another. The roar grew louder. The entire dungeon began collapsing. Stone rained from the ceiling. The gate was failing. Ethan's hunter instincts screamed one undeniable truth. If whatever lay below escaped, thousands would die. Maybe more. The stalker looked back at him. Then something impossible happened. The creature bowed its head, as if asking for help. As if after centuries of standing guard alone, it had finally reached the end of its strength. Ethan laughed, a shaky, terrified laugh. Great. He tightened his grip on his spear. I'm going to die, aren't I? The stalker simply stared. Ethan looked at the crystal, then at the abyss, then back at the monster. A C-rank hunter, Nothing special, not a hero, not an S rank, not one of the legends people wrote books about, just a survivor. But sometimes survivors were enough. With a roar of his own, Ethan charged. He plunged his spear directly into the damaged crystal. Light exploded through the chamber. Pain ripped through every nerve in his body. His mana flooded into the ancient seal. The crystal blazed brighter and brighter. The snapping chains began repairing themselves, one by one. The roar below transformed into an enraged scream. The abyss shook violently, but the prison was closing. The seal was healing. Ethan could feel his life draining away. Every second stole another piece of him. His vision blurred. His legs buckled. Still he held on. Still he pushed mana into the crystal. Until finally, silence. The chains stabilized. The crystal shone brighter than the sun, and the darkness below became still. The prisoner had been sealed once more. Ethan collapsed. His body hit the stone floor. The last thing he saw was the Pale Stalker approaching. The creature knelt beside him, not as a monster, not as a hunter, but as a guardian finally relieved of its burden. Then everything went dark. Years later, hunters would tell strange stories around campfires. Stories about a broken gate that vanished overnight. Stories about missing raid teams and ancient prisons hidden beneath the world. Most dismissed them as myths, just another hunter legend. But every now and then, survivors reported something unusual. A pale figure standing near unstable gates, watching, guarding, protecting. And if those hunters looked carefully, they would sometimes find a weathered spear planted in the earth nearby. The weapon of a long-forgotten C-rank hunter. A reminder that legends weren't always S-ranks who conquered kingdoms or slew dragons. Sometimes legends were ordinary people who stood their ground when everyone else had fallen. And according to the oldest campfire tale of all, on quiet nights near broken gates, a lone hunter can still be seen walking beside a pale guardian through the darkness, watching, waiting, keeping something far worse from ever escaping again. Most hunters laugh when they hear the story, until they're alone, until the fire burns low, until they hear a distant scraping sound somewhere beyond the trees. Then nobody laughs, because deep down, every hunter knows the same thing. The best legends are usually the ones that turn out to be true.